Good morning, everybody on the internet. It's Blind Justice coming to you live on the streets of Aberdeen, Washington, sitting outside City Hall. Day 57 of our peaceful protest, Resting is Not a Crime. And I want to briefly talk to you about stress. And the title, it's Stress Equals Situation Plus Perception. So, what does that mean? Break that down a little bit. Situations are the things that happen around us. They can include us or not, but it's just an event, right? So you can be walking down the street and then a car crash happens to block up, right? That's a situation that you may or may not have been a factor in, right? If somebody was looking at how you're dressed or focused on you or whatever, and then they crash your car, that you could have been a factor, but it's a situation, something that happens in your surroundings. And then perception is how you view it and your thoughts about it and your understanding of the situation. So it's those two things together that gives rise to stress. Because it's not just one or the other. It's not just an action that is the stress. Right, so this not just the situation, because we can have a handful of people and put them through the same situation and have vastly different experiences and stress levels of the subjects going through that experiment. So there's another factor, and that's the perception, and that's really the thing that you have a lot more control over, because you don't necessarily have a lot of control over everything else going around you, but you do when it comes to your perception, or you can have control. A lot of people have kind of relinquished control of their perception and kind of just handed it off to whoever they've deemed to be an appropriate authority figure for them. So they say, well, you tell me what this means, you tell me what this is, and instead of taking responsibility themselves to understand, to view, to look deeply at it, to analyze and perceive and understand what they're perceiving, and then try to align those perceptions on truth and reality, it gets shifted and blended based off of the other input they're given, and a lot of times just apathy, like I said, where they just kind of relinquish their control of their perception to whatever entity that they want, saying, no, you tell me what this means, you tell me what this is. And typically that's where we find the majority of people in America today are in that category of just kind of apathetic and not really taking personal responsibility for their perceptions, and that can be found with language, right? When somebody uses a word and then somebody hears a different word or hears a different meaning of a word, rather than saying, oh, I hear it this way, being aware of your perception, and then going back to the person that said the words, all right, now you said this, what did you mean by that? Or let's find some common ground or common definition that we can go to, a reference, a dictionary or something, right? So it starts to, you can see how that's one of the sources of stress, or components of stress. So learning to harness your perception, train your perception, test your perception, be aware of your perception, and how you're perceiving something, and not assume that what you're perceiving is the full picture, right? Then that opens you up to investigation, to inquiry, to find more information, to get a more complete picture and understanding of the situation. And like we talked about with fear, people are afraid of what they don't understand, right? How do we defeat fear? With understanding. So, and that goes with your perception. If you're willing to perceive, you're willing to investigate and open your perception up instead of closing it off, then you can understand more, and you realize, oh, well, this isn't something to be afraid of. Like, oh, this isn't something to be stressed about. Oh, there's a way to mitigate the risk to myself or to others, or to my property or to my job or to my ideas or whatever. Yeah, so that's situation and perception. So I encourage you guys to slow down throughout your day and be aware of how you're perceiving things, your thoughts, when you're analyzing things, when you're judging things, and recognize, oh, I'm judging this. Oh, why am I? What's it based off of? Oh, I see this way. Why do I see this way? Good morning. And yeah, because then you can help mitigate your stress. You can find stop gaps when you say, what's another way of looking at the situation? What's another way of implementing a safeguard or implementing another way of dealing with the situation than what I've seen it or what I've used to doing with the situation? And there's plenty of medical studies and research done on this. We talked about the amygdala being the fight or flight center of the brain, and how it's enlarged and hyperactive in most Americans, and that goes from a constant bombardment of all these different situations that may not even be in their vicinity, because they're watching the news or getting a newspaper and they're like, all this stuff is crazy, and then they perceive it to be the reality where they live when it's not, right? Because it's happening in this city over here, or it's happening across the country here, it's happening across the world over here, that must be the state of affairs of the world and humanity. And then so that's the lens that they have, that's the perception they have. So then their stress level rises and rises and rises, and you have all these super stressed people with very unskilled understanding of how to respond to situations. And yeah, so you have that is the current state of affairs. So there's ways of actually shrinking the amygdala, shrinking that reactive nature, and that's by slowing down, by deep thought, contemplation, meditation, some mindfulness of the situation, of your thoughts of it, of your perceptions of it, being able to say, oh, this is what it is, and then research and verify and validate or invalidate it, right? Prove it or falsify it, and say, oh, okay, well this actually wasn't a big thing, or this really wouldn't affect me, or this really wouldn't do this or that. And then you can move on from that after doing your research and expanding your understanding. So that's it. Kind of rambled on. And you guys have a wonderful day. Today is going to be our last day of canvassing for signatures, and then we turn them in tomorrow. So hope you have ease and you learn to slow and be aware of your perceptions and situations, and that you can breathe and notice that your stress kind of dissipates, and you can control a big aspect of your stress level just through understanding your perception. All right, have a lovely day. Day of Presley Bear.